I was 6 years old when I first learned to kill. The lasgun was heavier than I expected, M36 Contrail pattern, standard issue, the weight of imperial justice made manifest in composite and focusing crystal. My hands barely wrapped around the grip. Instructor Mordant stood behind me, his shadow falling across the firing range like the eye itself. That purple wound in the sky that never closed, never blinked, never looked away. "Breathe out," he said. "Squeeze. Don't pull." The crack hiss of the discharge made my ears ring. Downrange, the target, a straw effigy wearing cultist rags, sprouted a smoking hole where its chest should have been. I remember the smell most clearly, ozone and burning, the scent that would become more familiar to me than my own sweat. "Again," Mordant said. I fired until my shoulder ached and my hands trembled. I was 6 years old. I hadn't yet learned to write my own name, but I could put 20 rounds through a man-sized target at 50 meters. This was normal. This was Cadia. The fortress city of Casar Mirak rose around us in hab blocks of rockcrete and reinforced ceramite, a mountain of human defiance built to withstand the end of everything. Every building was a bunker, every street a kill zone, every citizen a soldier who simply hadn't been issued a uniform yet. We learned our numbers by counting ammunition, we learned our colors by identifying regiment markings, and we learned our alphabet by reading the names on memorial walls, walls that stretched for kilometers, carved with names of the dead going back 10,000 years. My mother was a quartermaster sergeant. My father had died at Casar Galan when I was 3, holding a breach against a demon incursion. I barely remembered his face, but I remembered his lasgun. It hung above our bunk now, cleaned and oiled, waiting for me to grow into it. That was the Cadian way. You inherited duty before you inherited anything else. At night, I slept in barracks with 40 other children. We woke at 0400 to the sound of artillery drills that shook dust from the ceiling. We dressed in miniature flak vests and ran through obstacle courses designed to break adult soldiers. The eye of terror watched from above, turning our noon sky the color of a bruise, painting our shadows purple against the permacrete. The priests said it was a reminder that our world sat at the edge of damnation, the cork in a bottle holding back an ocean of screaming madness. They weren't wrong. When I was 7, they took us to watch an execution. A militia captain from Casar Varadon, caught worshipping the ruinous powers in secret. The commissar read the charges in a voice that could cut through artillery fire. The captain wept and begged, speaking in a language that hurt to hear, that made shapes in the air that didn't belong in reality. A single bolt round ended it. The captain's head came apart like a wet fruit. "Remember this," our instructor said, walking us past the cooling corpse. "Chaos is a seduction. It promises power, freedom from duty, escape from suffering. It lies. This is the only escape chaos offers." I threw up in an alley afterward. So did half my cohort. The other half stood at attention, faces blank, already learning to swallow the horror down deep where it couldn't interfere with their trigger pull. By 8, I could field strip my lasgun blindfolded in 43 seconds. By 10, I knew the effective range of every standard guard weapon, could recite the Imperial infantryman's uplifting primer from memory, and had killed my first live target, a mutant hound that had gotten loose from the gene testing pits. By 12, I understood that the Emperor was watching, but he was very far away, and the purple eye in the sky was much, much closer. At 14, I became a white shield. The ceremony was brief. They gave us proper flak armor, still too large. We had to pad the shoulders with rags, and real lasguns with real power packs. No more training weapons with dampened yields. We stood in formation as Colonel Vasht of the Cadian 122nd Stone Fists reviewed us with eyes that had seen things we couldn't imagine. "Not yet. You are the future of Cadia," he said, his voice carrying across the parade ground. "You are the gate, you are the wall. When chaos comes, And it will come, children. It always comes. You are what stands between the Imperium and annihilation. Do you understand? Sir, yes, sir. 300 voices, not quite synchronized, not quite deep enough. I can't hear you. Sir, yes, sir. The colonel nodded. Good. Remember that when you're dying. Remember that your death means something. It means the line held 1 second longer. It means someone else lived. It means Cadia Stands. We shouted it back at him, the words already carved into our souls. Cadia Stands. They assigned me to 3rd Platoon, White Shield Company Beta. My squad mates became the first real friends I'd known. There was Jess Morvan, who could shoot the wings off a fly at 100 meters. Kyle Torrin, built like a Lehman rust tank, who'd been born in the very shadow of the Cadian Gate. Mira Sen, who laughed at everything because the alternative was screaming. And Harik Ven, sharp-eyed, sharper-tongued, who made everything a competition. I'm going to be Kasserkin, Harik told me on our first night in the White Shield barracks. Elite Stormtrooper, hotshot lasgun, carapace armor, the works. What about you, Koris? I shrugged, checking my lasgun's power pack for the 3rd time. I just want to survive long enough to earn my purple stripes. That's the difference between us, he said, grinning. I'm going to be special. You're just going to be a grunt. He was right, in the end. But he wouldn't live long enough to enjoy it. Our White Shield deployment came on a grey morning when I was 15. The Voxcasters crackled with reports of cultist activity in the Rosvar Mountains, 40 kilometers north of Khazar Myrak. Intelligence suggested a small cell, maybe 20 heretics trying to raise a shrine to the dark gods. Command decided it was a perfect opportunity for us to blood ourselves. Sergeant Tor led our platoon. He was ancient by Guard standards, 42, with scars layered on scars and a cybernetic left eye that clicked when he focused. Listen close, he told us as we loaded into the Chimera transports. This isn't training. Out there, the enemy doesn't shoot blanks. They don't aim high. They want you dead, because dead is what chaos does best. You panic, you die. You break, you die. You forget your training, you die. Clear? Clear, Sergeant. The Chimera's interior smelled like promethium and fear sweat. We sat in silence as the transport rumbled north, each of us alone with our thoughts. I kept my hands on my lasgun, feeling the weight, the solidity. This weapon had been designed on some forge world I'd never see, blessed by tech priests I'd never meet, shipped across the Imperium to end up in my hands. Billions of lasguns, billions of soldiers. I was a single drop in an ocean of humanity, a single round in a magazine that would never empty. It should have felt insignificant. Instead, it felt right. The cultists hit us in a dried riverbed where the cliffs on either side made perfect firing positions. The ambush was textbook, if the textbook was written by lunatics who didn't value their own lives. They revealed themselves too early, screaming hymns in that language that twisted in your ears. Autogun fire raked our Chimera, sparks flying from the armored hull. Disembark, return fire. Sergeant Tor's voice cut through the chaos. I remember stumbling out into the dust and the screaming. I remember bringing my lasgun up, finger finding the trigger. I remember seeing a cultist. A woman, couldn't have been older than 30, her face covered in scrawled marks that seemed to writhe, leveling an autogun at me. I remember the crack hiss of my lasgun, the smoking hole that appeared in her chest, the way she looked surprised, as if she'd forgotten she could die. I remember the nothing I felt as she fell. Contact left, someone shouted. Mira, maybe. Everything was noise and movement. Las fire crackled through the air, the coherent light leaving after images. A cultist charged our line with a crude knife, howling in that wrong language. Kyle shot him, then shot him again, and again, until the power pack warning light blinked and Kyle was screaming too, trigger held down on empty. Sergeant Tor's cybernetic eye swiveled to focus on Kyle. Reload. Do it now or I shoot you myself. The fight lasted 11 minutes. We killed 17 cultists and captured 3 more for interrogation. The commissar who arrived afterward executed all 3 without bothering to question them. They chose their side. He said simply, "There's nothing they can tell us worth the risk of hearing." Our casualties, 2 dead, 5 wounded, 3 seriously. I knew their names. I'd bunked with them, trained with them, shared rations with them. Now I'd never speak to them again. Harrick found me after, sitting on the Chimera's track with my lasgun across my knees. "You did good," he said. "Clean kills. No hesitation." "I don't feel anything," I told him. And it was true. The woman I'd killed, I didn't feel triumph or horror or guilt, just a hollow emptiness where an emotion should have been. "Good," Harrick said, and he actually sounded relieved. "That means you're going to survive." I looked up at the purple sky, at that eternally watching eye, and wondered if survival was actually a blessing. We spent 2 more years as White Shields, rotating through increasingly dangerous deployments. We cleared cultist cells in the underhives. We stood watch on the Cadian Gate itself, that massive fortress overlooking the Eye of Terror, feeling the warp pressure like invisible static on our skin. We trained until our bodies moved like machines, until reloading a lasgun was as natural as breathing, until the weight of our armor felt like a second skin. When I turned 17, they gave us the choice: Interior Guard or deployment to the wider Imperium. 1 in 10 soldiers, chosen by lottery, had to stay on Cadia. The planet needed defenders, needed soldiers to hold the gate while their brothers and sisters fought across the galaxy. It was considered an honor. It felt like a death sentence, not from combat, but from never knowing anything beyond this purple-skied prison. I drew a deployment slip. Harrick drew Interior Guard. He took it better than I expected, standing at attention as the assignments were read, his face carved from stone. After, he found me at the barracks. "Kasserkin trials are next month," he said. "Interior Guard can still apply. I'm going to make it." "I know you will," I said, and I meant it. "You'll be fine out there," he said. "Just remember, check your corners, trust your squad, and for the Emperor's sake, don't die somewhere stupid." "Same to you." We shook hands. I never saw him again. Years later, I heard he made Kasserkin. I heard he died on Cadia when the Blackstone Fortress struck. I hope it was quick. The integration into the Cadian 122nd happened in stages. First came the formal oath-taking, where we swore loyalty to the God Emperor, to Cadia, to the regiment. The regimental chaplain, an augmented priest with a voice like grinding gears, led us through the liturgies while we stood at attention for 2 hours straight. By the end, my legs were numb and my throat was raw from reciting catechisms. Then came the reality of being a shock trooper. They assigned me to 2nd Squad, 5th Platoon, Charlie Company. My squad leader was Corporal Venn, not Harrick Venn, a different Venn, Torren Venn, who'd survived 6 campaigns and had the scars to prove it. He looked at us new recruits with something between pity and resignation. "Right," he said, walking down the line. "You're White Shield veterans, which means you think you know something about war. You don't. You've fought cultists and mutants on your home turf. You haven't seen what's out there in the wider galaxy. You haven't faced Orks who laugh as they charge through lasgun fire. You haven't watched Tyranids consume an entire city and remake it into something that screams. You haven't felt what it's like when reality breaks and demons crawl through the cracks." He stopped in front of me. "What's your name?" "Mela Koris, Corporal." "You scared, Koris?" "Yes, Corporal." "Good. Fear keeps you sharp. Pride keeps you fighting. Together they keep you breathing. Remember that." My squad became my world. There was Jessa Tor, the squad's Vox operator, who could recite the entire Imperial infantryman's uplifting primer backward while calling in artillery strikes. Gan Prevest, our designated marksman, who'd grown up on an agri-world and still marveled at cities. Lek Harvin, the heavy weapons specialist, who carried a missile launcher like it weighed nothing, and Thon Kask, who'd been with the 122nd since he was 16 and had the 1,000-yard stare to prove it. They taught us what the White Shield training hadn't covered. How to sleep in full gear, how to eat ration bars that tasted like compressed sadness, how to clean your lasgun in the dark, how to tell the difference between incoming and outgoing fire by sound alone. They taught us the unofficial prayers, the ones you muttered when the commissar wasn't listening, the ones that asked the Emperor not for victory but just for death to be quick. But mostly, they taught us to be ammunition. That's what the Imperial Guard is, at its core. We're not soldiers in any romantic sense, we're bullets with legs. The Imperium has trillions of us, and it expends us with the same calculation as it expends bolter rounds or artillery shells. The math is simple. If throwing 1,000,000 guardsmen at a problem solves it, then 1,000,000 guardsmen die. If it takes 10 million, then 10 million it is. The logistics didn't lie. I saw the manifest reports during quartermaster duty. The Departamento Munitorum allocated lasguns, flak armor, and rations based on expected casualty rates. Not if we died, but when and how many. The average life expectancy of a guardsman in active combat was 15 hours. Cadians did better. We lasted 48 on average. But that was still measured in days, not years. I was fine with that. I'd been raised for this. But some of the others, the conscripts from softer worlds, they broke when they figured it out. I watched a kid from some paradise world, Tanaris I think, go catatonic when he realized the Imperium had assigned his regiment a 73% casualty projection for our first deployment. Just sat down, stopped responding, stared at nothing. The commissar shot him for cowardice. The commissar was probably being merciful. Our commissar was Erich Revik, a lean man with a sharp face and sharper eyes, who wore the black coat and peaked cap of his office like a second skin. The stories said commissars were political officers who executed anyone who showed weakness, that they were the Imperium's blunt instrument of morale through terror. Commissar Revik proved that reputation partially right and mostly oversimplified. Yes, he executed deserters. Yes, he shot soldiers who broke under fire. But he also sat with us before battles, sharing his personal liquor ration and telling stories about campaigns he'd survived. He recited the litany of courage with us, his voice steady and certain, a rock in the storm of our fear. And when we fought, he was there in the front lines, his power sword crackling with energy, his last pistol barking defiance. "I don't ask you to die for me," he told us once. "I ask you to die for each other. Die for the soldier next to you. Die so they can live 1 second longer. Die so the Imperium can draw one more breath. That's all any of us can do. But it's enough. It has to be." I hated him for making sense. I hated him for making our expendability sound noble. But I also believed him, because the alternative was admitting that our lives meant nothing at all. My first off-world deployment came on my 18th birthday. The warp travel was worse than anyone had described. They told us it would be disorienting, uncomfortable, unnatural. They hadn't told us it would feel like reality itself was trying to digest us. The Geller fields protected us from the worst of it, from the things that swam through the immaterium, the entities that looked at our ship with hunger beyond hunger. But even within the field I felt it, a pressure behind my eyes, a taste like copper and rot, dreams that weren't dreams, where purple skies bled into geometries that violated physics and voices whispered promises in that language that hurt to remember. On the 5th day of warp transit, the Geller field flickered. Just for a second. Just long enough. In that second I saw something looking back at us through the ship's hull. Something vast and terrible and infinitely patient. Something that knew my name. The field stabilized. The vision ended. I vomited for 6 hours straight. "First time's always rough," Corporal Venn said, wiping his own mouth. Half the regiment was sick. Gets easier, sort of. We translated back to real space above Gospora Secundus, a hive world in the Segmentum Obscurus that was under siege by Ork forces. The briefing was simple. Wah! Urgok had swept through 3 systems, leaving burned worlds in its wake. Gospora was the next domino. We were one of 40 regiments deployed to stop it. 40 regiments. 4 million soldiers. The Departamento Munitorum expected 60% casualties in the first month. The drop was my first taste of true scale. Our transport, one of thousands, descended through atmosphere that was choked with smoke from burning hives. Below, I could see the hive city of Gospora Prime, a mountain of rockcrete and metal that stretched from the planet's crust to the edge of space itself. And beyond it, I could see the Ork encampment. No, encampment was too small a word. It was a cancer, a sprawling tumor of scrap metal and fungi that covered hundreds of square kilometers, growing like a living thing. There were millions of them. Greenskins as far as enhanced optics could see, all bellowing and fighting and building crude vehicles from salvage. The sky rained spores. The ground shook with their machinery. "Emperor's teeth," someone whispered. "Shut it," Corporal Venn snapped. "Eyes front, we land in 2 minutes, check your gear." I checked my lasgun for the 100th time. Power pack, green, focusing crystal, clean, barrel, clear, bayonet, fixed. My hands moved automatically, muscle memory taking over, while my brain tried to process the impossibility of what we were about to do. 4 million soldiers against millions of Orks, and we were supposed to win. The transport touched down in what had been a commercial district. Now it was rubble and corpses, the previous defenders, guard regiments from local recruitment, who'd already been ground down to nothing. We deployed in combat formation, squads spreading out to secure the landing zone, while artillery units set up behind us. The Orks hit us before we'd finished unloading. They came from everywhere and nowhere. A green tide that poured out of buildings and sewers and places I couldn't identify. They weren't subtle. They didn't need to be. They were Orks, massive, brutal, laughing as they charged, bullets spraying from crude weapons that should have jammed after 2 shots, but somehow kept firing. "Contact, all sides." The Vox erupted with reports. "Second squad, wall position, now." Corporal Venn's voice cut through the chaos. We formed up behind a collapsed wall, lasguns barking in unison. The Orks didn't care. They kept coming. We dropped them by the dozens, lasbolts punching through green flesh. But more kept coming, and more, and more. "Aim for the head," someone shouted. Probably Gan, our marksman. "Aim for center mass," Corporal Venn overrode. "More likely to hit. Volume of fire, people." I fired until the barrel of my lasgun was hot enough to burn through gloves. Fired until my shoulder ached from recoil, fired until I stopped seeing individual targets and just aimed at the mass of green flesh and crude armor. An Ork, bigger than any human, muscles like cables, tusks like knives, broke through our line. Thon Kask hit it with a crack missile at point-blank range. The explosion painted us all with gore. "Reload! Reload!" I was screaming it without realizing, hands shaking as I swapped power packs. The first wave broke after 20 minutes. We counted our dead. 3 from our platoon. Not from my squad, not yet, but 3 soldiers I'd trained with, eaten with, who I'd know by face and name. They were meat now, cooling in the rubble. "This is what you signed up for," Commissar Revik said, walking the line. His coat was spotless. His face was calm. "This is the Emperor's work. Every Xenos we kill is one less that can threaten humanity. Every second we hold is a second the Imperium endures. You did well. Now dig in. They'll be back." He was right. They came back. Again and again. For 3 days straight. On the 4th day, I killed my first Ork in melee. We were holding a transit hub. a massive junction of rail lines that connected different sections of the hive. The strategic value was obvious. Whoever controlled the hub could move reinforcements across the city, which meant the Orks wanted it, and we couldn't give it up. The problem was ammunition. 3 days of constant fighting had depleted our supply lines. The Navy transports were trying to break through the Ork aerial blockade, but until they did, we were rationing. 5 power packs per soldier. After that, it was bayonets and prayers. I was down to my last power pack when the Orks came again. This time they'd brought something worse. A war boss, a massive brute in crude mega armor, wielding a power claw that crackled with stolen Imperial technology. It smashed through our defensive line like it was made of paper, bellowing in its guttural language, and Orks poured through the breach. My power pack ran dry. The warning light blinked red. The lasgun was now a 4-kilogram club with a bayonet attached. An Ork, not as big as the war boss, but still twice my size, saw me and charged. It was grinning. They always grinned. Combat was joy to them, a holy sacrament in their brutal religion. It raised a crude axe. I met it with my bayonet. The blade went in under its ribs, angled up toward what I hoped was something vital. The Ork's momentum carried it forward, driving the blade deeper. Green blood sprayed across my face, hot and thick and smelling like fungus and rot. The Ork laughed even as it died, grabbing my shoulders, trying to crush me. I twisted the blade, felt it scrape bone. The Ork's laughter turned to a wheeze, then stopped. It fell on me, pinning me under its weight. I couldn't breathe, couldn't move, couldn't see. I was drowning in Ork corpse and my own panic. Strong hands grabbed me, pulled me free. Corporal Ven's face appeared above me. Up! Move! The battle raged around us. The war boss had been stopped. A Lehman Russ battle tank had put a battle cannon shell through its chest, but the Orks were still everywhere. Ven shoved a fresh power pack into my hands. I slapped it into my lasgun with shaking fingers and kept firing. We held the transit hub. Barely. At the end of that day, our company was at half strength. Second squad was down to 4 soldiers, Corporal Ven, Jessa, Thon, and me. Gan was dead. Lek was dead. 3 others whose names I'm forgetting now, not because I didn't care, but because if I remember everyone who died, I'd never stop screaming. That night we sat in the ruins of a cafe, sharing a single ration bar between the 4 of us. Jessa was crying quietly, not making any sound, just tears running down her cheeks. Thon stared at nothing with those dead eyes. Corporal Ven methodically cleaned his lasgun, hands moving with ritual precision. I looked at my own hands. They were stained green. I'd washed them 3 times, and the stain wouldn't come out. "Does it get easier?" I asked. Corporal Ven didn't look up from his weapon. "No, you just get better at living with it." "How long have you been fighting?" 6 years, 8 campaigns. I've seen soldiers fall to Orks, cultists, Tyranids, Traitor Guard, and one time a planet's entire ecosystem that turned carnivorous for reasons no one could explain. You know what I've learned? What? How to stay alive when everyone around me dies. He looked at me then, his eyes older than any humans should be. That's all any of us can do. Survive one more day, one more hour, one more second, and hope that when we finally die it means something. The planet broke before the Guard did, Jessa whispered. It was the first thing she'd said in hours. Cadia Stands, Thon added, his voice hollow. Cadia Stands, I agreed, because what else could I say? We held Gospora Secundus for 3 months. The Ork Wa eventually broke under combined Guard, Navy, and Astartes counter-offensive. I saw Space Marines exactly once. Ultramarines, towering figures in blue ceramite, who killed with a precision that made our efforts look like children playing soldier. They didn't acknowledge us. We were beneath their notice, just part of the landscape they fought across. When it was over, the Cadian 122nd had taken 67% casualties. We'd started with 4,000 soldiers. We shipped out with 1,300. I was one of them. I was 19 years old. I was a veteran. The distinction felt meaningless. The years that followed blurred together, a carousel of deployments across war zones I can't always remember clearly. There was Cronus 4, where we fought traitor guard regiments who'd once been loyal. There was Balhaut, a frozen moon where we held trenches against cultist waves, while temperatures dropped to -60. There was Mordian, where we reinforced the Iron Guard during a chaos incursion that turned half the planet into a screaming wound in reality. Each war was different. Each war was the same. I learned the rhythms of the Guard. Deploy, dig in, fight, count the dead, deploy again. New recruits would arrive to fill the gaps in our squads, fresh-faced and terrified or arrogant and doomed. They'd die or they'd harden. The ones who hardened became the squad, and we'd mourn when they eventually died too. Corporal Venn was promoted to sergeant. Jessa died on Cronus IV, a sniper round through the skull, while she was calling in artillery coordinates. Thon lost his legs to a landmine on Balhaut and was invalided out. We heard he took his own life within a month. The squad reformed around new faces, new names, new soldiers who became brothers and sisters until they became corpses. I made corporal at 21. The purple stripe on my uniform should have filled me with pride. Instead, it filled me with dread. Now I was responsible for keeping them alive. Now their deaths would be on my hands. My squad, Privates Set Harnack, Kiv Moros, Jan Ter, and Vix Kale. I knew everything about them within a week. Set was from Kasser Partox, had a wife and a daughter he'd never see again. Kiv was a joker, always had some quip even when we were waist-deep in corpses. Jan was the quiet one, religious beyond even the standard Imperial cult devotion, who prayed for an hour every night. Vix was the youngest, barely 17, who still thought war could be won with bravery alone. I tried to keep them alive. I really did. But the galaxy doesn't care about good intentions. On Mordian, we were holding a trench line against cultist forces when the demon came through. I still can't describe it properly. Human language wasn't built for what I saw. It was too many angles and not enough dimensions. It was a color that shouldn't exist. It was a sound that came from inside your skull. It wore flesh like we wear clothes, except the flesh was still screaming. The cultists had performed some ritual, opened a tear in reality, and something from the warp had accepted the invitation. Our lasguns did nothing. Las bolts passed through it like shooting at smoke. It killed by existing. Soldiers within 10 meters just fell, blood pouring from their eyes and ears, their bodies convulsing. Those who looked directly at it went mad, instantly, clawing at their own faces, screaming in that wrong language. "Fall back!" Sergeant Venn's voice, distorted by vox static and the demon's mere presence. We ran. Discipline shattered. Training failed. We were animals fleeing a forest fire. And the fire was reality itself burning. Vix didn't run fast enough. The demon touched him. Not physically, but its attention fell on him, and Vix turned inside out. I saw it happen. I can still see it. His skin peeled away from muscles, muscles peeled from bone, bone liquefied into marrow, and all of it reversed and repeated and happened simultaneously. He was screaming the entire time. He was screaming in that wrong language. He was one of them now, part of the demon, part of chaos. I shot him. Burned through half a power pack, putting las bolts into what used to be my soldier, my responsibility. The daemon died when the Astra Militarum brought in a Baneblade super-heavy tank and hit it with a demolisher cannon blessed by the ecclesiarchy. The shell was inscribed with prayers, filled with sanctified promethium, and guided by the Emperor's light or blind luck or pure desperation. It worked. Reality snapped back. The demon died screaming, if you could call that sound screaming, and the warp tear sealed. The cost, 300 guardsmen dead or driven insane. 2 city blocks rendered uninhabitable because reality hadn't fully recovered and geometry still didn't work right. and Vix, who I'd promised to keep alive, who was now a stain on the ground that hurt to look at. That night, I found Commissar Revik sitting alone in the ruins of a chapel, staring at his power sword. I almost ran, I told him, confessing. When I saw that thing, I almost broke. I almost forgot my duty. He looked at me with tired eyes. But you didn't. I wanted to. Of course you did. You're human. Fear is human. Running is human. But you didn't run. You fought. You killed one of your own men to save him from worse. That's what being Cadian means. Not fearlessness. Doing what's necessary despite the fear. Does it ever stop? I asked. The nightmares, the memories? No, he said simply. But you learn to function anyway. You have to. Because if we stop, if we break, if we give up, then chaos wins. And we can't allow that. Not while we still draw breath. He was right. I hated that he was right. I was 26 when the news reached us. We were on Armageddon fighting Orks again, because there were always more Orks, an infinite green tide, when the Voxcasters started screaming priority messages. Something was happening at Cadia, something big, the 13th Black Crusade. Abaddon the Despoiler, War Master of Chaos, was throwing everything at the Cadian Gate. This wasn't a raid. This wasn't a probe. This was the end of everything. Cadia was burning. Every Cadian in the regiment requested immediate transfer. We were denied. Our orders were to hold Armageddon. Cadia would hold itself, command said. Cadia always held. For weeks we fought Orks while the Vox brought us fragmentary news. The Cadian Gate had fallen. Kasr Mirak was under siege. The Eye of Terror was expanding. Lord Castellan Creed was rallying the defense. The Astartes were there. Black Templars, Ultramarines, others. The Navy was there. The planet was holding. Cadia was holding. And then it didn't. I remember exactly where I was when I heard. We were in a supply depot, resupplying ammunition after a 3-day running battle through Armageddon's ash wastes. Sergeant Venn found me, his face gray as stone. Koris, he said quietly, you need to hear this. He led me to a Vox station where a crowd of Cadians had gathered. The broadcast was fragmentary, damaged by warp interference, but the message was clear. Fortress of Kasr Galan has fallen. Evacuation of remaining civilians underway. Blackstone Fortress impact imminent. Lord Castellan Creed orders all forces to static. Then a different voice, younger, panicked. It's breaking apart. The whole planet is breaking apart. By the Emperor, the transmission ended. We waited for more. There was no more. Someone, I think it was Sergeant Venn, said quietly, Cadia Stands. We repeated it, all of us, hundreds of Cadians, standing in that depot on Armageddon, thousands of light years from home, saying the words like a prayer, like a promise, like a defiance against fate itself. Cadia Stands. But it didn't. Not anymore. Not the planet. The planet broke. The planet died. 10,000 years of defiance, of holding the line, of being the gate between Imperium and chaos, ended. Abaddon had finally won. The Cadian Gate was gone. The Eye of Terror was expanding into the great rift, cutting the galaxy in half. And Cadia was gone. I felt something break inside me. Not loudly, not dramatically, just a quiet fracture, like a stress fracture in armor that's taken too many hits. My entire identity had been Cadian. I was from Cadia. I fought for Cadia. Cadia was my purpose, my pride, my reason for existing. And now Cadia was rubble floating in space. I wasn't the only one who broke. Some soldiers went catatonic. Some deserted. A commissar shot 3 of them before more could run. Some drank themselves unconscious, and some, like Sergeant Venn, became harder, colder, more determined. The planet broke, he said, his voice like broken glass. The planet broke before the Guard did. You understand? They destroyed our world. They killed trillions. But they didn't break us. We're still here. We're still fighting. And we'll keep fighting until every last one of us is dead and then some. What's the point? Someone asked. I think it was Kiv Moros. What are we even fighting for now? Sergeant Venn grabbed him by the collar, lifted him off the ground. We fight for the Imperium. We fight for humanity. We fight because Chaos wants us to break and we refuse to give them the satisfaction. We are Cadian, and Cadia isn't a place. It's an idea. It's defiance. It's standing when standing is impossible. The planet may be gone, but we're still here. Which means Cadia stands. He dropped Kiv and walked away. We stood there in silence, processing. Then, slowly, we returned to our duties, checked our weapons, prepared for the next deployment. Because what else could we do? We were soldiers. We were Cadian. We were all that was left. The war on Armageddon ended 3 months later. The Orks were pushed back. Temporarily, they'd return. They always returned. The Cadian 122nd was down to 800 soldiers. We'd started with 4,000. I was promoted to sergeant at 27. My squad was mostly new recruits, fresh off whatever worlds they came from. Only Set Harnack remained from my original squad. The others were dead or invalided or lost. The new soldiers weren't Cadian. They were from Armageddon, from Krieg, from hive worlds I'd never heard of. They looked at me, at my purple eyes and my Cadian regimental markings, with something like awe. Is it true, one of them asked, that you held the line against Chaos for 10,000 years? Yes, I said. Is it true that Cadia never broke? The planet broke, I told him, using Sergeant Venn's words because they were the only truth I had. The planet broke before the Guard did. They wanted to know everything. What was Cadia like? What was it like growing up at the Eye of Terror? How did Cadians become such good soldiers? I answered their questions, and in answering I realized something. Cadia wasn't gone. Not completely. Not while I could teach them. Not while I could pass on the traditions, the techniques, the spirit that made Cadian soldiers the best the Imperium had. I started training them the Cadian way. Wake at 0400. Weapons maintenance before breakfast. Drill until muscle memory took over. Learn to field strip your lasgun blindfolded. Learn to trust your squad. Learn that fear is acceptable, but cowardice is not. Learn that you're probably going to die, but you'll die standing. They learned. Some of them even learned well enough to survive. On the 5-year anniversary of Cadia's fall, the regiment held a memorial service. Every surviving Cadian attended. There were 43 of us left out of the original 4,000. Commissar Revek led us in the litany of remembrance, reading names of fallen soldiers until his voice was hoarse. When it was my turn to speak, I stood before soldiers who'd never seen Cadia, would never see Cadia, could only imagine what it had been like. I was 6 years old when I learned to kill, I said. I was born in Kasr Myrak, under a purple sky, in the shadow of the Eye of Terror. I was raised to be a weapon, to be expendable, to die for the Emperor without question or hesitation. And for most of my life, I thought that was what being Cadian meant. Being the best soldiers, being the most disciplined, being willing to die. I paused, looking at the faces before me, Cadians and non-Cadians alike, soldiers who'd all learned the same lesson I had. I was wrong. Being Cadian means more than that. It means standing when you should fall. It means holding when you should break. It means defying the impossible, because defying the impossible is what we do. The planet is gone. Kasr Myrak is rubble. The Eye of Terror won, at least physically, but Chaos didn't break us. It can't break us. Because Cadia isn't a planet. It's everyone who refuses to give up. It's every soldier who stands their ground against the darkness. It's you. I pointed at the new recruits, the off-worlders, the soldiers who'd never seen purple skies. You train like Cadians, you fight like Cadians, you hold the line like Cadians. That makes you Cadian, regardless of where you were born, and as long as one of us still stands, As long as one of us still fights, then Cadia stands. Cadia stands. And it always will. They shouted it back at me, voices raised in unison. Cadia stands. I'm 32 now. I've been fighting for 14 years. I've served on 17 worlds. I've killed more enemies than I can count. I've lost more friends than I can remember. I've seen things that should have broken me, should have killed me, and somehow, I'm still here. Sergeant Torrin Venn died last year on Vigilus. A Chaos Space Marine, a traitor Astartes, a mockery of everything the Imperium stands for, cut him in half with a chain axe. With his dying breath, he killed the traitor with a crack grenade, holding it to the bastard's chest until it detonated. They both died. Venn at least died clean. I'm the senior sergeant now. The new recruits look at me the way I once looked at Venn, like I'm a myth, like I'm impossibly old, like I must know some secret to survival. I don't. I just got lucky more times than I deserved. We're shipping out to Vigilus tomorrow. The war there never really ended, just evolved. Orks, Chaos, Genestealer cults, everyone wants Vigilus, which means the Guard has to hold it. The projections say we'll take 40% casualties in the first month. The projections are probably optimistic. I spent today cleaning my weapons. My lasgun is the fourth one I've carried. The original is still at Kasr Myrak, buried under planetary debris somewhere. My flak armor has been patched so many times it's more patch than armor. My boots have walked across more worlds than most Imperial citizens know exist. Tonight, I sat with my squad, and we shared a bottle of Amasek that Corporal Harnack had been saving. We told stories about the worst deployments we'd survived, the stupidest orders we'd followed, the moments that should have killed us, but didn't. We laughed, because gallows humor is all we have. We toasted the dead, because forgetting them would be worse than dying ourselves. Why do you keep fighting? One of the new recruits asked me. You've done your part. You could request transfer to a training cadre, spend the rest of your service teaching instead of fighting. I considered the question seriously. It deserved that much. I keep fighting because that's what Cadians do, I said finally. I keep fighting because every battle I survive is another battle where my squad might survive. I keep fighting because the alternative is giving up. And I'm constitutionally incapable of that. I keep fighting because somewhere in the galaxy, chaos is still there, still watching, still waiting for humanity to break. And I refuse to give them the satisfaction. I raised my glass. To Cadia, may she stand forever. To Cadia, they echoed. Tomorrow I'll board a transport. I'll travel through the warp, endure the nightmares and the pressure and the feeling of reality trying to digest me. I'll deploy to Vigilus. I'll dig trenches, I'll stand watch. I'll fire my lasgun until the barrel melts, or I run out of targets, or I die. I'll probably die. Statistics say so. 14 years is beyond lucky. It's miraculous. The Emperor's protection only extends so far, and I've used up more than my share. But until I die, I'll stand. I'll hold the line, I'll do my duty. Because I'm Cadian, and that's what we do. The planet broke before the Guard did. Cadia stands. And as long as I'm still breathing, as long as there are soldiers who remember what it means to be Cadian, it always will. For the Emperor, for the Imperium, for every soldier who fell so I could keep standing, for the purple sky I'll never see again, for the fortress city that raised me to be a weapon, for the idea that defiance matters, that standing matters, that one human soldier in a galaxy of trillions can mean something. I am Mela Koris, Sergeant of the Cadian 122nd Shock Troops. I was 6 years old when I learned to kill. I was 26 when I learned what I was killing for, and I will die standing, as all Cadians do, because Cadia stands, now and forever.